The rain clung to him like a second skin, soaking through the patches of his threadbare coat. His boots, cracked and worn, slapped against the puddled sidewalk with a rhythm only loneliness knew. The city didn't notice him anymore, not the baristas brewing espressos, nor the professionals speed-walking past in pressed suits. He was part of the background now, gray like the sky, slow like the day. He didn't mind. Not anymore. It wasn't always this way. Once, he had a name people respected, a smile that meant something. But time and betrayal had stripped that away, leaving behind only the shell. His name was Samuel, but no one called him that now. That afternoon, as he turned down 5th and Grand, the sound of tires skidding broke his trance. A flash of red. A child's scream. Time slowed. A boy, no older than 10, was stuck in the crosswalk, his bike tangled in a pothole. A delivery truck barreled down the wet street, horn blaring, brakes screeching, too late. Samuel moved on instinct. He dropped his bag, bolted through the crowd, and lunged forward just in time to yank the child clear. The truck missed them by inches, splashing water and curses as it skidded past. The boy, wide-eyed and trembling, looked up at him. "You saved my life," he whispered. Samuel only nodded, still catching his breath. The boy's mother screamed from the sidewalk, running over, arms outstretched. But it was the boy who spoke again, the boy who unknowingly opened the first door back to Samuel's forgotten life. "You gotta come with me," the boy said, his voice firm with gratitude. "My dad owns the best restaurant in town. He'll wanna thank you." Samuel tried to refuse. He didn't want attention. Didn't want charity. But then he saw it, the earnestness in the boy's green eyes. The trust. The belief. Something he hadn't seen in years. He nodded, wiping his hands on his coat. They walked together in silence through the growing dusk, past storefronts glowing gold and neon. The boy talked about school, about bikes, about his mom and his dad. He called himself Leo. His small voice was a thread tying Samuel back to something real. When they arrived at the restaurant, the sign above the door read, "Bianchi's," in cursive gold. It glowed like a memory. 2 security guards outside raised eyebrows the moment they saw Samuel. "Can't loiter here," one snapped. "He's with me," Leo said boldly, grabbing Samuel's hand. The guards hesitated, unsure, until the maitre d' stepped forward, whispering something into a wireless earpiece. A moment later, the doors opened. Inside, the light was warm and the walls were lined with photographs of smiling people and vintage wine bottles. It smelled of garlic and rosemary, like love and money. The man who greeted them, tall, commanding, tailored in Italian silk, was Leo's father. He looked at Samuel with mild amusement, barely disguising his distaste. "You saved my boy?" he asked. Samuel nodded once. The man turned to the maitre d'. "Not money," he said. "Give him work. Let's see what he can do with a mop." Samuel didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He just said quietly, "Okay." They gave him a bucket, a mop, and a uniform that didn't quite fit, threadbare pants and a shirt with "staff" ironed crooked across the back. No name tag. No welcome. The chef didn't speak to him. The waiters called him "old man." The kitchen staff muttered when he passed, as if the stink of the street still clung to him. Samuel kept his head down. He scrubbed floors slick with grease. He cleaned bathrooms no one else wanted to touch. He picked up shards of broken plates, smeared lipstick off wine glasses, wiped down tables until his fingers blistered. He never complained. No one knew his name. That was fine. Leo waved when he saw him, though. Sometimes he'd sneak him a pastry from the kitchen, or sit beside him during Samuel's short breaks, chattering about school or video games. Samuel listened. He didn't say much, but Leo didn't seem to mind. There was a rhythm to the place, loud and fast. Every night, the restaurant buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, orders barked in Italian, and music playing too softly to hear over the noise. Samuel moved through it like a ghost. But people started noticing. The first to speak up was Ava, one of the older servers. She caught Samuel lifting a heavy delivery box no one else could budge. "You got more muscle than I figured, old man," she joked. Then Matteo, the sous chef, noticed how precisely Samuel mopped around the wine racks without disturbing a single bottle. "Used to clean churches or something?" he teased. Samuel just shrugged. By the end of the second week, someone had left a cup of espresso by his locker. No note. Just warmth. In the kitchen, he started to hum softly while cleaning. Old jazz tunes, the kind you only remember if you've lived enough. Some of the staff began humming with him. Still, he kept to himself. But the restaurant, the rhythm, the noise, the people, was pulling at something buried deep inside him. A piece of him he thought had died long ago. One night, he passed by a framed photo hanging near the bar. It showed the owner, younger, standing beside a different man in front of a tiny cafe. They were both smiling, arms around each other like brothers. Samuel's breath caught. He stared at it long after the others had gone home. Because the man in the photo, the one smiling in the background, wearing a white apron, was him. He stood frozen before the photo, the mop still in his hand, water pooling at his feet. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. But it was him. Younger, smiling. No gray in his hair, no lines cutting through his face. Back when he had a name, a purpose, a future. The man beside him, clean-shaven, arms slung casually around his shoulder, was Marco Bianchi. The same man who now owned this empire of restaurants, the same man who had offered him a mop instead of a thank you. Samuel hadn't heard that name in 20 years. He had to sit down. He found a stool in the corner of the wine room and just sat there, staring at the photo as though it might shift and show a different truth. But it never did. The past had a way of staying exactly where you left it, buried under dust, but never gone. The memories came like floodwaters. Back then, he and Marco had been inseparable. They'd grown up in the same orphanage, stole apples from the same market, shared dreams over cold bread and borrowed wine. At 20, they scraped together enough to open a tiny cafe on the outskirts of town. Café Nova, they called it. Samuel did the books, cooked on weekends. Marco handled charm and wine pairings. They were supposed to grow old together, running that place like two old fools with too many stories and not enough hair. But everything fell apart in a single night. Samuel remembered the police. The shouting. The forged invoices. The envelope of cash, discovered, in his apartment. The betrayal so sharp he'd felt it slice through bone. Marco had looked surprised, even saddened, as they cuffed him. Samuel went to prison for 7 years. And when he got out, nothing. No home, no family, no cafe. Marco had taken everything. Now here he was, years later, back under the same roof, reduced to a cleaner. And Marco hadn't even recognized him. Maybe the years had been kind to Marco. Or maybe Samuel was just unrecognizable after all he'd lost. But as he sat there, the rage didn't come. What came instead was numbness. A dull ache where something bright used to be. He knew now why the restaurant felt familiar. Why the layout tugged at his bones. This wasn't a new place. This was a reinvention. Marco had built his empire on the bones of the cafe they once shared. He stood up slowly, the stool creaking beneath him. And that's when Ava walked in. She stopped, seeing his face, pale, hollow, changed. "You okay, old man?" He looked at her, tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he pointed to the photo. Ava glanced at it, then back at him, puzzled. You know them? Samuel nodded. I helped build that place, he whispered, voice barely audible. Ava looked at him for a long moment. Something in her expression shifted, doubt, then curiosity. But she didn't press him. Just gave a small nod. That night, when he left, he didn't go to the shelter. He walked. 4 miles. Not away, but toward something. Toward the truth. Because ghosts only haunt when you leave them alone. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Marco returned. The restaurant pulsed with quiet tension, staff straightened their jackets, polished silverware twice over, whispered his name like an omen. Marco didn't visit often. He preferred to manage from his estate, sending directives through layers of managers and assistants. But when he came, the air grew sharper. Samuel was cleaning near the back exit when he heard Leo's excited voice. "Dad's here." He watched from behind a curtain of wine racks as Marco swept in, designer sunglasses still on, smiling like a man who owned not just the building but the people inside it. The staff greeted him like royalty. Kisses on cheeks, hands clasped, shoulders squeezed. Samuel kept out of sight. It had been weeks since he discovered the photo. Weeks since the past rose up and clawed its way back into his chest. He hadn't told anyone else, not yet. Not even Leo. But every night, he looked at that photo before leaving. A ritual. A reminder. Proof that he hadn't imagined it all, the cafe, the dream, the betrayal. That day, Marco made his rounds, kissed his wife on the cheek in her office upstairs, shook hands with vendors in the kitchen, and gave Leo a high five with a laugh. And then, he saw Samuel. The smile dropped for a second. A flicker. Almost imperceptible. But it was there. Recognition. Marco's eyes narrowed. He approached slowly, casual but calculated. "You. What's your name again?" Samuel stood up straight, meeting his gaze. "People just call me Sam." Marco tilted his head, studying him. "Sam, huh? You've been working here long?" "A few weeks." There it was, the briefest crack in Marco's perfectly groomed mask. A flash of fear, confusion, maybe even guilt. But he recovered fast. He always had. "Well. Keep up the good work." He clapped Samuel on the shoulder and walked away. Samuel didn't flinch. He watched him go, muscles taut, fists clenched around the mop handle. Later, Ava found him in the alley on break. She handed him a cigarette without asking if he smoked. They leaned against the wall in silence. "You ever gonna tell me what this is about?" she asked. Samuel exhaled slowly, eyes on the city skyline. "I built something once," he said. "With someone I trusted more than anyone. Then he tore it down and handed me the ashes." Ava didn't respond right away. "The guy in the photo. That was you." He nodded. "Jesus," she whispered. "I lost 20 years, he said quietly. "My wife. My kid. My name. And now I'm cleaning floors in the empire he built on my bones. Why don't you tell someone?" Samuel turned to her, and for the first time, his eyes burned. "Because I don't just want revenge," he said. "I want truth. I want everyone to see who he really is, not just a headline. I want to take back what he stole. Brick by brick. Name by name." Ava stared at him, something reverent in her gaze. "You're not just a cleaner," she said. "No," Samuel replied. "I'm a witness." "And Marco?" He had no idea that the man scrubbing his floors was the ghost he buried, returned and ready to speak. It was supposed to be a regular Thursday night. The dinner rush had just begun, waiters danced between tables, plates clattered, and the scent of garlic and butter hung thick in the air. Samuel was mopping near the hostess stand, eyes low but ears sharp. That's when she walked in. He didn't see her face at first, only the flash of a red dress, silk flowing like a memory. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she moved toward the reservation desk. The hostess greeted her with the warmth reserved for familiar VIPs. "Mrs. Bianchi, welcome back." Samuel's heart stopped. That name. The woman turned, her profile catching the low amber light, and for a moment the world blurred around the edges. It was her. Claire. He hadn't said her name in years. Not out loud. It had always been too painful, like saying it would summon the ghost of who he used to be. But here she was, no ghost at all, flesh and breath and elegance. She hadn't changed much. Her hair was shorter, more styled, her face slightly leaner. But the way she carried herself, with that mix of strength and vulnerability, was unmistakable. She glanced around the restaurant, her gaze sweeping over the dining room like a queen surveying her court. And then her eyes met his. Time fractured. He froze. The mop slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Her expression didn't falter, not at first. But then something flickered behind her eyes. A tremor. Recognition slow and hesitant, like a song half remembered. She took a step forward. He turned and walked away. In the staff hallway, he leaned against the wall, his breath shallow. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of seeing her again. The past had just walked through the front door in red heels. 15 minutes later, he heard the soft tap of heels in the corridor behind him. "Samuel?" Her voice was a whisper, uncertain, as though she didn't quite trust her own ears. He turned slowly. Claire stood there, tears forming in her eyes. "It is you," she said. "My God." He didn't know what to say. His voice felt trapped beneath years of silence and shame. "I thought you were dead," she said, voice cracking. "They told me you were gone, that you never wanted to see us again." He stared at her. "Who told you that?" Claire shook her head slowly. "Marco. After the trial, after the arrest. He said you were dangerous. He said you blamed everyone." Samuel laughed, but it came out hollow. "Of course he did. I didn't believe it at first," she whispered. "But when you stopped writing, I didn't know what to think. I was pregnant, Samuel. Alone." His breath caught in his throat. "What?" "Our son," she said, voice shaking. "Leo." It hit like thunder. He swayed on his feet, steadying himself against the wall. "Leo," he choked out. "Leo is mine?" She nodded, tears falling now. "You saved him, didn't you? That day at the crosswalk. That was you." Samuel nodded, barely able to breathe. Claire stepped closer. "He knows you as the cleaner," she said. "But he has no idea he's already met his father." And just like that, the world tilted. Samuel wasn't just reclaiming his name, he was reclaiming his blood. Samuel didn't sleep that night. He walked the streets long after his shift ended, replaying her words over and over until they blurred. "Leo is yours." The phrase echoed in his chest like thunder across an empty canyon. It didn't feel real, not yet. He had seen Leo every day since arriving at Bianchi's. Shared jokes. Accepted pastries. He'd bandaged the boy's scraped knee once, after a fall in the alley. Now he realized, every gesture, every laugh, every time he had instinctively protected that boy, it wasn't just kindness. It was instinct. A father's love, unaware of its own origin. The next morning, Samuel showed up early. The sun hadn't yet warmed the sidewalk, and the restaurant's back door was still locked. He sat on a crate by the dumpsters, watching the world wake up. Claire met him behind the building, just as they had arranged in a brief, whispered conversation the night before. She came alone. Her eyes were red. She had clearly slept no better than he had. "I didn't come here to start a war," she said quietly. "I just needed to see you. To know the truth." Samuel nodded. "I never abandoned you. Marco made sure I couldn't reach you. I believe you." He stared out at the alley, voice low. "Did Leo ever ask about his father?" Claire hesitated. "When he was little, yes. I told him his father was gone. That he had loved him very much but couldn't stay." Samuel felt that like a knife in the ribs, not cruel, just true. "And now?" he asked. "Now he's older. I think he's stopped asking. Or maybe, he doesn't want the answer." Samuel swallowed. "He deserves to know." Claire nodded slowly. "Yes. But not from me. When the time's right, it should come from you." A silence settled between them, both weighted and gentle. Then she asked the question he hadn't prepared for. "What are you going to do, Samuel?" He looked up. His eyes were no longer weary, they were sharp again. "I'm going to finish what I started," he said. "I'm going to expose Marco." Claire didn't flinch. "It won't be easy. He's protected now. He has power, lawyers." "I know," Samuel said. "But he also has a past. And I was there for every lie." She stepped closer, voice trembling. "Be careful. He's dangerous." "So am I," Samuel said quietly. She gave a sad smile, one filled with old love and new sorrow. "I still see the man you used to be. And I think Leo will too." Just then, the back door opened. Leo's voice echoed from inside. "Mom? You out here?" Claire turned. "Coming, sweetheart." She looked back at Samuel. "He doesn't know I'm meeting you." "He can't, not yet." Samuel nodded. And then Leo appeared in the doorway, tousled hair and a juice box in hand. He spotted Samuel and smiled. "Hey! You're here early." Samuel smiled back, eyes wet with emotion. "Morning, Leo." The boy had no idea that the man he was talking to was more than a friend. He was blood. The plan took shape in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, when the restaurant slept and the city exhaled. Samuel didn't have lawyers or a publicist. He didn't need them. He had the truth. He knew where the bodies were buried, not literal ones, but the paper trails, the off-the-books payments, the second set of ledgers Marco had kept stashed during their cafe days. And if Marco was anything, he was consistent. Samuel was willing to bet he still kept his sins close, just hidden better now, beneath designer suits and forged spreadsheets. He just had to find them. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. Marco had always kept a private wine cellar under the restaurant, an exclusive area, accessible only by a keycard. Samuel had seen staff deliver bottles there but had never been invited inside. Rumor was, it held more than just rare vintages. Late one evening, Ava handed him something folded in a napkin. A keycard. "Don't ask how I got it," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "But you've got an hour before the manager does inventory." Samuel's heart beat like war drums. He nodded once. Down the stairs he went, into the underbelly of Bianchi's, a place where candlelight flickered off stone walls, and dust-coated shelves like secrets. The door clicked open. Inside, the air was colder, older. Wine bottles lined the walls, yes, but beyond them stood a heavy safe and a narrow metal filing cabinet tucked in the shadows. Samuel didn't hesitate. He went straight for the cabinet. Inside, files. Dozens. Some with names he recognized, vendors, investors, competitors. Others marked only with dates and codes. He began snapping photos with his burner phone, every page, every receipt, every scribbled note. And then, he found it. A tape recorder. Dusty, old. Almost laughable in its retro simplicity. He pressed play. At first, static. Then a voice. Marco's voice. Can't believe Samuel didn't see it coming. Honestly, I thought he might kill me when they cuffed him, but he just stood there. Like a damn statue. Makes it easier. People trust statues. They don't talk back. Samuel's breath caught. The tape went on. He thinks I forged those invoices myself. Truth is, Claire helped. Poor thing thought I was protecting him. God, she's dumb when she's in love. Useful, though. Her testimony sealed it. Click. Samuel's hands trembled. Not from fear. From vindication. That was it. The confession. All the years, the prison, the betrayal, the loss of his family, all of it laid bare in one stupid, arrogant monologue Marco never thought anyone would hear. He pocketed the recorder, heart pounding. As he turned to leave, he heard a sound upstairs. Footsteps. His time was up. He moved fast, slipping out of the cellar and down the delivery hallway. Out the back, into the night. The tape safe in his coat pocket, the truth heavy in his hand. He didn't need revenge anymore. He had something better, proof. Samuel didn't sleep that night. Instead, he listened to Marco's voice on that tape, again and again, until the words became nails hammered into the coffin of the lie that had ruined his life. There was no ambiguity. No deniability. Marco had confessed to everything, framing Samuel, manipulating Claire, using her testimony to seal the deal. He hadn't just stolen a business, he'd stolen a family. But the truth wasn't enough on its own. It needed a stage. Ava helped set the plan in motion. She'd become more than a coworker, she was an ally, a believer. She wasn't the only one either. Matteo, the sous chef, and even old Mr. Cavallo, the dishwasher, were in on it. Everyone who had worked beside Samuel saw the shift in him, the fire reignited in his gaze. He was no longer a cleaner. He was a man reclaiming his name. The opportunity came 2 days later. Marco had planned a private dinner to celebrate a new investor partnership. Big names. A select guest list. Press photographers. And, of course, his wife and son. Samuel made sure to be on shift. By now, Marco had stopped pretending not to recognize him. He avoided Samuel completely, eyes darting elsewhere when they passed. He hadn't said a word. That was fine, it made what came next more satisfying. The restaurant was dressed in elegance that night, golden candles, white linens, champagne on ice. Marco took his seat at the head of the long table, Claire at his right, Leo on the other side, beaming. The new investors, a tech startup duo with deep pockets, looked impressed. Samuel moved quietly through the space, refilling water glasses, invisible by design. Then, right before dessert, Claire stood up. "Marco," she said, voice smooth. "Would you mind if we played a small tribute?" He smiled tightly. "Now?" She nodded. "Just a short one. For your guests." She tapped her phone. The room stilled as the speakers came alive. At first, it was just static. Then, Marco's voice. "Can't believe Samuel didn't see it coming." It echoed through the room. Guests froze mid-bite. "Thought he might kill me when they cuffed him." Marco stood up, too late. "Claire helped. Poor thing thought I was protecting him." "Turn it off." Marco roared. But no one moved. Everyone was watching him. Even Leo, confused, looked up from his dessert. The tape ended. Silence stretched like a taut wire. Then Claire spoke, calmly. "That was recorded in the wine cellar. Marco forgot to erase it. She turned to the investors. Now you know the kind of man you're in business with. The flash of a camera went off. Then another. Samuel watched it all from the back of the room, heart beating like a war drum. Marco's face was a cocktail of rage, panic, and disbelief. "You set me up," he hissed at Claire. "No," she said. "You set yourself up. Years ago. We're just pressing play." From the side of the room, a pair of detectives stepped forward. Ava had called them just before dessert. The confession was admissible. They'd heard enough. "Marco Bianchi," one officer said, "you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." Samuel finally stepped forward. Slowly. Silently. Marco turned, jaw slack as he truly saw him now. "Samuel," he whispered. But Samuel said nothing. He didn't need to. The tape had already spoken. It was over. Marco Bianchi was led out of his own restaurant in handcuffs, cameras flashing like a storm around him. His investors looked stunned, betrayed. His staff stood in shocked silence, watching their untouchable boss become just another criminal with his head ducked and wrists bound. Samuel didn't celebrate. He just stood at the back of the room, hands clasped behind him, watching justice arrive with the slow, grinding rhythm of inevitability. Claire approached him once the room began to thin. She didn't speak at first, just stood beside him, breathing in the moment. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was earned. Then she said it. "He's not your shadow anymore." Samuel closed his eyes. "Let that sink in." "He never was," he replied. "I just forgot." The restaurant closed early that night. By morning, the story had hit every major news outlet. Restaurateur Marco Bianchi arrested after secret tape reveals decades-old betrayal. Headlines spun the tale: the wrongful conviction, the stolen business, the buried evidence. Samuel's name returned to the world, no longer as a convict, but as a man who had survived the fire and walked through it upright. Leo found out everything the next day. Claire sat him down at home, just the two of them. She told him the truth, about Samuel, about the past, about the man who had pulled him from the street that rainy afternoon. The man who was his father. Later that evening, Leo came to the restaurant. Samuel was out back, cleaning the alley for what he assumed would be the last time. Leo approached quietly. "Hey," the boy said. Samuel turned. His heart clenched. "I know everything," Leo said. "About you. About Mom. About what he did." Samuel nodded slowly. "I'm sorry you had to find out like this." "I'm not," Leo said. "I'm glad I know." A long pause. Then. "Are you still going to work here?" Samuel chuckled. "I'm not sure. Maybe I'll take some time. Figure out what comes next." Leo bit his lip. "Could I still see you?" Samuel knelt, suddenly eye to eye with his son. "I'd like nothing more," he said. They embraced. No music. No grand speech. Just arms around shoulders, the past folding into the present, a scar closing. 2 weeks later, the restaurant changed hands. Marco's assets were seized, but Claire retained partial ownership. The staff stayed on, Ava now ran the floor, Matteo got promoted to head chef. And Samuel? He didn't disappear. He didn't need to hide anymore. He came to work in a suit now. No mop. No shadows. Just a clipboard, a warm smile, and the quiet respect of people who now knew exactly who he was. The scar on his face, once sharp and angry, had faded after surgery. But he chose to keep a small line, a reminder of where he'd been. Because Samuel was no longer a man with something to prove. He was a father. A partner. A name restored. Spring came early that year. Sunlight spilled through the restaurant windows as if the city itself had decided to forget the grayness of winter and start again. Inside, the mood was different now. Lighter. Fuller. The staff still hustled, orders still shouted, dishes still clattered, but something invisible had shifted. There was peace. Samuel stood behind the front counter, watching Ava gently instruct a new hostess. She was firm, confident, kind, exactly the kind of person he'd always hoped would rise with him. Mateo waved from the kitchen, his apron already smeared in tomato and pride. And then came the sound he never thought he'd hear in his restaurant again. Laughter. Leo's. The boy ducked behind a server, playfully hiding from his mother, who chased him through the aisles with mock fury. Claire caught him, lifted him briefly in her arms, and both collapsed into a booth with the kind of joy that couldn't be rehearsed. Samuel couldn't look away. This was his second chance, no, his first real one. The life he was meant to build, only now the foundations were stronger, set in truth. Claire noticed him watching and gave him a small, meaningful smile. He walked over, a little slower than usual, and slid into the booth beside them. "How's business today?" he asked Leo. "Better now that I'm in charge," the boy grinned. "I told Ava to make the breadsticks bigger." Samuel chuckled. A natural leader. Claire leaned her head against his shoulder. "I have news," she said quietly, slipping a folded piece of paper into his hand. He opened it slowly, a printout of a sonogram. His heart stopped. "Is this?" She nodded, tears already forming in her eyes. "We're having another one." He stared at the blurry little shape, the tiny miracle floating in black and white. Then he looked at Leo, who was staring at the screen upside down. "That's my brother?" he asked. "Or sister," Claire smiled. Leo's face lit up. "Can we name them after me?" Samuel laughed. "Let's not traumatize the kid." The moment swelled in his chest, and for once, he didn't try to contain it. He let the joy take up space. A week later, the staff threw him a quiet celebration, nothing dramatic, just a dinner at the long wooden table in the back. They toasted to new beginnings, to truth, to the return of the man they'd once dismissed as a ghost. And then Ava stood up with a grin. "We had a sign made," she said, beckoning toward the entryway. There, hanging where the old Bianchi's plaque had been, was a new name carved in warm wood and gold. Ember and Ash, a restaurant reclaimed. Samuel touched the edge of the plaque with his fingertips. Ember, for what still burned inside him. Ash, for everything he had to walk through to get here. Outside, the city bustled on, unaware of the small, perfect revolution that had occurred inside this corner of brick and light. And down the street, a man once mistaken for a vagabond walked hand in hand with his son, his wife beside him, her belly just beginning to show. No more alleys. No more cellars. No more silence. He had a name. He had a home. And finally, he had peace.